Today, we're talking the Detroit Auto Show, reveals, refreshes, and of course, electric vehicles, and the reasons for their slower than planned adoption. I'm Jer Stays, and this is your Daily Detroit for Thursday, September 21st, 2023, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan every single day of the week. Today's guest is Eric Trytko, a longtime analyst and voice of all things motors and automotive. Before we get started, though, a quick update on the strike going on. And it's not much substantive news, honestly. As of this recording, it's expected there will be no movement by Friday at noon, when the United Auto Workers will probably announce more targeted strikes. It's possible they could call out all workers at all plants at all three companies at once, but that would burn through their strike fund far quicker. And that's why I have not spent a ton of time on it. There just hasn't been much material progress going on to talk about. So, well, we could be here a while. Anyway, let us pay a bill and then get to our conversation with Eric.
Does your financial advisor take the time to really listen to you? Is your financial strategy personalized to you and your family? Will your financial advisor be there as your life and financial situation change? Hi, I'm Jerry Mangona, your Edward Jones financial advisor. I live here in Corktown, just a few blocks from the Daily Detroit studios, and when we work together, we'll focus on what's important to you. We'll use an established process to create a personalized financial strategy backed by the advice, tools, and resources to help you reach your goals. And we'll partner together to help your strategy stay on track. Contact me toll-free today at 866-975-8655. Again, that's 866-975-8655. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
Joining me virtually, longtime friend of the show, Eric Trytko, talks about motorsports, motors of all kinds of things like that. Eric, it's so good to talk to you again.
Jer, great to be back on the show.
Yeah, so I heard you had a chance to go down to the North American International Detroit Auto Show. Are they calling it just the Detroit Show? What are they calling it now?
Yeah, no, you had it right the first time. North American International Detroit Auto Show. So they can't make up their mind if it's the Detroit Auto Show or the International Show or both. So, embrace it all. Embrace it all.
So you spent some serious time down there. We're going to talk about a variety of topics, including the show and automotive-related stuff. But before we get started, this show has a large public component. It is something that's very much a big deal in downtown Detroit. With the risk of maybe losing some listeners early on the show, but I trust you all will stay with us. Would you go to this show? Would you recommend someone goes to this show?
Yes. As a consumer, especially if you are, not directly in the auto industry, I think it'd be a great opportunity for you to check out a lot of different things. And there are some very cool displays and even some stuff for kids there. So as a family outing, I think you'd be a good time for everybody. Yes.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm very glad to hear that. And I know that's something that I'm going to check out myself. But I think we need to get into the nitty-gritty of everything, whether it's unveilings, EVs, show positioning, all that stuff. I think first off, let's talk about the unveilings and kind of the view from a media perspective. Now, I had been in previous years. I have not gone to the auto show as media in a while. So I'm really interested to see what your thoughts are, because I know you and I both have gone for a while, and you've gone for many years.
Yeah, I think this was my 15th show that I've been to. Or close enough to, depending on when it was and wasn't happening, and the M1 experience versus everything else, so.
Oh, you even did the M1 experience. That's right.
Yep, exactly that during the COVID years. So Ford kicked everything off on Tuesday night down in Hart Plaza, where they showed off the F-150, which is a mild refresh, essentially. It's mostly cosmetic. They have a new tailgate on it. So like in the middle, it almost opens like a normal door rather than a drop-down tailgate. So it's easier to get things in and out. They've got some storage cubby spaces in there as well, new grill, new trim levels and things like that. About what you'd expect in a sort of a mid-cycle refresh. I think they dropped one engine out of it, which wasn't really selling well anyways, which was a base V6. And they're really concentrating on like the hybrid version of that V6. So yeah, it was a good display down there. They showed the GTD concept Mustang as well, I think, at the same time. And for those that hung around for it, Darius Rucker played for a couple hours down there. So
well, interesting. Now, do you feel like this is more of like an iPhone refresh where it's like there's some other things that are involved, but they changed the ports and added a camera? Is it that kind of level refresh where it's
not even?
Really?
Even.
Okay.
No, when I say the big news was the tailgate, that's how much it changed. I mean, it's got a different grill, and again, they've tweaked some of the different trim levels, and I think they've consolidated a lot of the ways that you can order it to make it less confusing. I don't think they were as bad as Ram at one point, where there were like literally a billion different ways you could order a truck, but they were getting very close to it. So making it easier for consumers to kind of pick and choose has gone a long way in cleaning up sort of the order form for the F-150.
That also probably helps with production as well.
100%. Yes, absolutely.
The F-150 is a very popular vehicle, so I can get the idea that they don't really want to mess with success.
No, and it's one of those things where and I'm not joking when I say this, it's priced, I can't remember what the base one is, but let's just call it somewhere between $35,000 and $40,000 for the most basic F-150, up into you can probably option it almost outside the, like, say, the Raptor and the Raptor R, the super bro truck, but just like a normal platinum plus kind of truck up to the 90s. So, and if you go Raptor, then we can talk six figures for an F-150.
Okay, you called the Raptor the super bro truck. Talk to me about that. Why is that?
I mean, it's a fun truck. It's a great truck. The regular Raptor is, I'm going to get nailed for this, but let's just call it 450, 500 horsepower, maybe a little more than that. Four-wheel drive, off-road, very, very off-road, desert kind of runner. And then the cool truck, you see them running around all the time. And then the Raptor R is a supercharged V8 that's 670 horsepower, something like that. Sorry, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but in that general area. And it's just bigger tires, more lift, bigger, faster, stronger, kind of Steve Austin, $6 Million Man kind of theme.
Or Steve Austin Stone Cold.
The original Steve Austin, yes. But yes, very much the Stone Cold Steve Austin kind of demographic. So there you go.
What about some other brands?
So Cadillac did some refreshing of the CT5, which I know most people don't look at sedans anymore, but the CT5 is an absolutely fantastic sedan. So if you'd like a car and you want to support local manufacturer, that's a very good one. The run has been lately in the last couple of years, when we saw it in a couple different vehicles, all the screen size. So I think there's 33 inches of screen in the CT5, like vertically. And I think Lincoln has got in I want to say it's the Aviator, I believe is what they did it in, which is their kind of bigger two-row SUV. I think it literally goes from side to side now in the cabin. It's all screen. GMC debuted a new Acadia, so for families looking for a good three-row crossover, that's going to be a pretty solid choice. Nice refresh, big, again, just like everything, bigger, wider, longer. Simplified powertrain choice, but has more power, more torque, should have similar or better fuel economy. To that note, GMC is really leaning into their two top-end trim levels with the Denali, which is their luxury, which if you get a Denali trim, it actually is very nice, or AT4, which is their rugged off-road, real off-road. Jeep refreshed their Gladiator pickup truck and really pushing three different trim levels in that, which are the Willys, the Rubicon, and then the Mojave. Different trims for different things, where Mojave is like set up as a desert runner, Rubicon sort of the rock crawler, and Willis is the kind of do it all. Those were the big reveals. And then Ford also showed a version of the Mach-E, which they call the Mach-E Rally, which is set up, again, there's a theme running where they're trying to make different vehicles into rally cars. Porsche did it with the 911. Lamborghini actually has done it with one of their cars, and now Ford's setting up sort of a rally version. It's supposed to go into production and just not be a limited edition vehicle. So looks like fun. Should be fun.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of these automakers, too, are definitely doubling down on higher trims, sometimes more luxe kind of feels to them. I mean, there's criticism and whatever of it, but clearly it feels like this is what people are buying. Maybe it's only because that's what they're offering, but it feels like that's where a lot of the American car market is right now.
Yeah, that's true. And then I did take a look at the more affordable end of things. So like at Ford, I spent some time crawling through the Maverick, which I really haven't had a chance to spend any time with. And I'll tell you what, if you need a good, solid, basic transportation car that can do a lot of different things, it can move you out of an apartment, it can make whatever runs you need to Lowe's and Home Depot or whatever other big box store, get good fuel economy, be reasonable and fun to drive, and it's not huge, which especially for those who live in the city will really appreciate. The Maverick is really a great vehicle, and there's no doubt why Ford's having trouble keeping up production, and for some trim levels, there's even a wait time. The other one I looked at is a car that I had dismissed when it came out, and this is the first time I got to see it, which is the Toyota Corolla Cross. So Toyota Corolla, a little bit bigger, set up as a light SUV kind of vehicle. And I'll tell you what, you fold the back seat down, you open up the hatch area, and it is huge inside. Like, it's almost Wolfhound size huge inside. Maybe you can't stand up, but you can put a lot back there. It's one of those great cars that look not that big on the outside, but once you open it up, you're like, wow, there's a ton of room. And again, Corolla Cross, pretty reasonably priced, low to mid 30s, which in today's world where the average vehicle transaction price is 45,000 plus, that's really good value.
Yeah, that is. And for listeners who don't know, how big are your dogs?
All right, so our male Wolfhound, the top of his head is probably close to 40 inches, if not a little higher. The bottom of his chin easily clears a standard kitchen counter. And then, yeah, exactly. And so then our female is about maybe 4 inches shorter than that. So yeah, they're big dogs. They don't weigh a lot, relatively speaking, at about 145 pounds, but they're very tall and they're very long. So yes.
Yeah, that Maverick, I see it on the road, and if I'm going to own a pickup truck, I feel like that's the truck that calls to me in multiple ways, because I have multiple needs to haul things sometimes and do different stuff. So if I were to do a pickup truck, and I'm not sure if I would, but if I were, I look at that and I go, okay, that's manageable, because I like being a little higher, but I don't like being as high as, say, some of the Rams that I see around or stuff. Like, that just doesn't sound like. I've driven trucks that big, at various times in my life for others, and I like a little bit of more of a middle ground, if you will.
Yep. And then the great thing is that you can get from the factory a hardcover for the top, so you can actually have, in some ways, a big lockable trunk, so you don't have to worry.
That's great.
Need to leave things in there, then you don't have to worry about it, so it locks pretty tight.
That's actually exactly what I would be looking for in one of my questions around that.
Yep.
Let's talk about EVs a little bit. Electric vehicles are kind of all the rage right now. What kind of electric vehicle stuff did you see at the show? And then I think we should talk a little bit about the idea in general of EVs, because it's really a hot topic, obviously, with all the news happening.
Sure. Of course, the OEMs are pushing the EV news, and that's where they're showing where they're trying to go. Stellantis talked about trying to have 50% of their lineup as electrified. Now, when they say electrified, that means plug-in, not completely battery EV, by 2030. And by 2035, they're saying they're going to be 100% EV. Okay. And that's pretty much the theme around most people. General Motors showed, or Chevy especially, showed off the Blazer EV and the Equinox EV again at the show. So, VW, very small area, had the ID4. In general, that's the big push is EVs, because that's the mandate from the world governments. The interesting thing is the demand side of EVs has, in the last 3 to 4 months, cratered. And when I say cratered, I mean absolutely cratered, to the point where Volkswagen in the EU is shutting down their plant that builds the ID3 and the ID4 for like 3 months because there's no orders. They have plenty in stock, and that we're seeing that throughout. My day job, I work with car dealers, so I get to hear from them directly what the EV demand is. And it's a combination of things. The people who are really interested have already bought it, but also it costs a lot of money to make these things because of raw materials and low production. And that makes it unaffordable for most people. I mean, when you talk about an EV vehicle being good value at 50 grand, again, that kind of changes the outlook. For those that are interested in EVs and kind of want to experience a couple different things, at the auto show, if you go, at the back end of it, they have the EV experience test track back there. So VW, Tesla, Chevy, Cadillac, GMC, Ford, and BMW have vehicles back there. You get to go for a ride along. You kind of look at what you want to go for a ride in. You can queue up in a particular line. It's a very small, short track back there, but at least you get the idea of what one feels like, and you can poke around at it. If you're interested in EVs, and especially at the show, there's a chance to go look at it. Go look at them and kind of see if that's something that you want to think about.
Well, and I have a couple of questions around that, but I'll start this with the point that, and longtime listeners will know, I don't hate EVs. In fact, you and I did an episode from inside a Mach-E, and it was fun. Like the
Yes.
torque on all that. Like this isn't a, we're going to like tear the whole thing apart, but there are issues at play, especially with all the news that are that's happening right now in regards to EVs, EV adoption. If you see that drop off, what is your vibe that you're catching from automakers, dealers, things like that? And where do you think maybe some of the future of these things might go? Because, I'm seeing a lot of political angst on both sides of the aisle about EVs right now.
Yep. It's interesting. So I think from a consumer side, there's a few things going on here. Number one is the price. Flat out, it's absolutely the price. And as a consumer, what I would tell you 100% is if you're interested in EV, you do not buy one, you lease one for a couple different reasons. First and foremost, technology is advancing quickly, so you don't want to be stuck in something for a long time, 2-3 years max, and then you want to get out of it for a lot of different reasons. And to that point, if you lease an EV vehicle, you can get the full $7,500 federal tax credit no matter your income level, no matter where the car is made, because it's considered a commercial sale. And for commercial sales, the restrictions on the subsidy from the government of the $7,500 does not apply. So that's something that if you are interested in EV, whatever brand, wherever it's made, that's the way to do it. And it's an immediate thing where if you were to actually buy it and qualify for it, it's actually just a credit at the end of the year on your taxes. It's not like you get cut a check for it. It's just you could subtract $7,500 off what you owe in your taxes. So in that way, it makes it much more tangible in what you're paying per month for the vehicle. So I think that's the one and only way to get into an EV right now is to lease it. So I think first and foremost, that's the way to do it. And then the other thing is I think there's a lot of FOMO when it comes to EVs in the sense of, well, if I buy it now, but things are moving so rapidly, I don't want to be in something 18 months from now and all of a sudden this is so much better, right? It's sort of like smartphones from like 2006 and 7 when it was, oh, I've got the iPhone 6. Well, I've got the 6S. Well, the 7. Can you imagine the difference between it or whatever? Yeah. So we're sort of in that area of how rapidly some of this stuff is going. But to that point, we're still in the very, very, very early days of EVs where we still need a completely different chemistry for batteries because the materials we're using, especially the weight, but also the basic raw materials. And there's a whole thing of conflict minerals and all that don't need to get into at this, in this conversation, but it's just not sustainable for the number of vehicles that world governments say that need to be built to replace everything. Just the materials aren't available to build it in any kind of volume on anything more than for 3 or 4 years at the current production levels. In the sense of if you were to take current production levels of ICE cars and convert that to EV, 3-4 years of materials, and then we're just out of everything.
I think there's also going to be differences in countries too, because China is subsidizing EVs and they have their own EV automakers with their own standards where EV adoption is moving faster in China, but an EV vehicle in China, some of them done in partnership with American automakers, some not. The Chinese EV is going to have different ranges. They've got some things like swappable battery. They've got some things that are different because of the different situations and infrastructure that they have over there, and also a very different incentive scheme that they're doing. And so you really got to look at it as multiple markets. You've got the EU, you've got North America and the United States, and then you've got Asia. And I think they're all going to be progressing at different levels. In fact, I think looking at the data, they are.
Yes, absolutely. And right now, there's a big conversation going on in Europe. And by right now, I mean literally at this very moment, about how heavily the Chinese are subsidizing their EVs and trying to bring them into Europe and sell them at really cheap. Well, I say cheap, but relative to what everyone else is selling at. And the EU is looking at that as unfair trade practices and maybe taking some retaliatory issues. To the EU too, there's some resistance to adoption because of the Ukraine war and because of how expensive electricity has become in Europe in the last 18 months, just the whole charging and the lack of charging infrastructure and what it costs to actually charge when you can. It's becoming almost as expensive, like here, as expensive or even more expensive to pay for the electricity to charge it than it is for the fuel. So there's that going on as well.
Not to use a tired war analogy, but no plan survives battle. Are we going to be seeing some changes? Do you think, this is just postulation, do you think that we're going to be seeing some changes in timelines and kind of what we build? Like, are we going to consider hybrids? Like, I think one of the only ones you can get now in America is one by Toyota, but it does still exist. Are we going to see some shifts in this strategy, you think?
There's going to have to be some changes and some shifts. And there needs to be conversation about not just one strategy or one magic bullet as this. So we need to have the conversation about hydrogen and where that fits in, especially in industrial applications, short haul trucking and things like that. Plug-in hybrids and just standard hybrids, I think, needs to be a bigger conversation as well. If you can have a plug-in hybrid that can do 50, 60, maybe 70 miles, the level of reduction in emissions and CO2 is huge, because most people aren't, when I say most, I mean, let's say 70 to 80% of the people aren't doing more than that in a day. They can recharge and continue to run on electricity that way. So we need to have more conversations about this. And in some ways, I look at this conversation like 10 years ago, you were talking about autonomous, how we're going to have full autonomy around the corner for cars, where you're just going to get in and it's going to take you places, and it's all going to be car sharing and things like that. And we've seen how far and how quickly that's come. Same thing when it comes to EVs. I think we need to have that realistic conversation across the board with everybody.
Yeah, autonomous is now, I think, going to be much more in that kind of fixed route situation. There's going to be a role for it, no doubt. I mean, it's clear, but it's going to be different than I think we thought. And I think EVs are going to be different than we thought, especially now that kind of yes, lots of people love Tesla and all that other stuff, but that Tesla kind of hype bubble has subsided with more and more facts, and we kind of know now where things really are at. And I feel like there were a lot of companies that kind of chased where people like Elon Musk said he was at, but he wasn't really there. And then when they try to duplicate the work, it doesn't come up the same way. So, yeah, I think we're going to be in for some recalibration of expectations, which is going to have some long-term impacts.
100%. Now, there's some great things going on in the EV space. A number of the OEM manufacturers have all gathered together and are going on the Tesla Plug standard, which will open up much more opportunity for charging in public spaces and on road trips. So that's helping a lot. A couple others are getting together to form their own EV charging company to compete with like EV America and ChargePoint and things like that. So there is innovation going on in that space, but the rate that people think it should happen versus how it's actually going to happen are two different timelines. And it goes into things like electronics. People think electronic stuff happens overnight, but it's actually a 3 to 5 year plan when you talk to those people. And it's exactly the same way when we talk about cars and big industrial projects. It's 5, 7, 9 years for something to actually complete a generational transformation.
Before we go, let's circle back to the auto show. What are one or two highlights that you would share with people from going that you're like, when you go there, you got to check this out?
Sure. I would say take a look at the EV test track. I think that's going to be really interesting. Go over to the Stellantis area, which as you're kind of walk in will be on the far right-hand side. They have what they call the Ram track. So they've got a number of different pickup trucks and some Jeeps on a quote-unquote off-road course, and with some really steep inclines and declines, and you're basically going around a corner at a 45-degree angle. Would encourage you to line up and do that. I think that's going to be great fun for everyone, especially, if you want to take your kids and have some fun with that. Jeep also has a little area for a kids zone with some little electric Jeeps, like little mini car kind of Jeeps. So that's some of the things you can do with your kids. And just a great chance to get in some of the cars. Now, not all the cars will be open to everyone, but most of them, and just touch and feel and smell and look at things and just get an idea of where we are in the automotive industry today and what might work for you. Again, it's mostly going to be domestics. Kia, Hyundai, Mini, they all have a very small area. Toyota has a pretty good size area. VW and Honda are in the back area. I think those cars were actually brought in by car dealers. In the very back corner, there's sort of what they call the luxury area. But again, you're not going to be able to get into any of those cars. It's more just to see them. And was brought in by some local auto dealers as well. But a lot of good things to see. I think you could spend a good solid 3, 4, 5 hours there. And, it's not the cheapest ticket in town, but I think it's you can get your money's worth for it.
That's good. And, just so people know, in case you're not familiar and haven't gone for 15 years, this is actually put together by the Detroit auto dealers. Like sometimes car makers are part of it. Sometimes individual dealers bring things. This is a show that's always been put on by the Dealers Association. This isn't like GM show or Ford show. You know what I mean?
I would say it very much now. In the past, I would say it was different where the OEMs were heavily involved, where they were spending, tens of millions of dollars on display and food and coffee and entertainment and things like that. But yes, it now has evolved more to be not quite a local dealer show, because there is, GM, Ford, and Stellantis are heavily involved, Toyota a little bit as well. But it is very much focused on the local market and local dealers, yes.
Eric Trytko, where can people find you?
Ooh, good play. Lately these days on Instagram, I'm somewhat active on there. For those of you listening across the river, you might occasionally see me if you watch some motorcycle racing on TSN. I've been over there doing a little bit of motorsports announcing for their motorcycle series, and that's kind of where you find me these days.
And you know what? We'll also find you here on Daily Detroit whenever we need something automotive. I really appreciate it, Eric Trytko.
Jared, thanks. I appreciate the time, and as always, it's great to be on the show.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. If you want to help the show, send it to somebody. The best way to grow what we're doing here at Daily Detroit is by word of mouth, friends telling friends. Thanks so much for listening. Mr. Friday, Devin O'Reilly returns tomorrow. I'm Jer Stays. Remember that you are somebody, and I'll see you around Detroit.